I get no commission for that,
Yet.
but that's what I eat. And my Hawaiian macadamia nuts.
All right, well, looks like we should be live for Triple T number 161. Crazy, crazy, crazy. Here we are. Um, can you believe the first month of the year is almost over? January 28th, 2025. Welcome to Triple T. My name is TJ Zill. I call myself a professional problem solver, which I always follow up with no, I don't know everything. I just have a unique way of asking lots of questions to help people find the solutions they are looking for. And I get to help people with all sorts of interesting stuff. Like, oh my gosh, there are times it totally blows my mind. And I'm not saying that to impress you, just to impress upon you that it just, I have gotten really good at asking questions. And I've done a lot of stuff, a lot of stuff. In fact, one of the things I did was I had my website remade. And so if you haven't seen it in the last week or so, check it out again. We did some more updates, and we're going to keep doing some more updates for a little bit until we get her massaged into top running performance. If you think of anything that I should change on my website, please reach out, let me know. I would appreciate some instruction. We are also, how about if I let you know how to find my website? It is the tswb.com, TSWB, the tall skinny white boy.com. And yes, that is what it stands for. I don't care what you find on the internet. It's been that since 89, I believe, or longer. So I predate the internet. Go figure. And we are live on YouTube. So I get to say, hi, Mom. And for all of you on YouTube, please do all the YouTube stuff. Click the subscribe button and leave comments and ring the bell and then leave some more comments and then come back and leave some more comments because I could use some more comments. Yeah, if I seem like I'm running a little low on the fuel today, it's been a long day. New clients and stuff, so I've been yakking away pretty solid since 10 o'clock, well, 9:30 this morning. So we're gonna plug right along with it. Let's see. Bouncing back to the website, I get to help people with all sorts of stuff like depression, anxiety, phobias, PTSD, smoke cessation, work with athletes from beginner all the way up to pro level. Got classes coming up for hospitality servers. So if you've got a favorite restaurant and you wish they were a little bit better at what they do, have them get a hold of me. And just let them know they don't know what they don't know. A couple of the restaurants I've worked with were a little hesitant, they admitted at first, until they saw some of the stuff that I teach, which they had never heard of before. But their sales certainly benefited from it. So that's what it's all about. It's about the experience. Also, relationships. Got a new relationship client today on the Triple P, the Perfect Partner Protocol. So they're excited, and we already got them on a good run. see, time to introduce the tie, keeping that tradition going. And can you believe that I have only had one repeat tie this year yet? I've still got more to introduce, and I'm trying to decide if I'm even going to do the bow ties. So I've got about 5 different bow ties, but a bow tie is a bow tie sometimes. This week's tie, old and professional, pretty straightforward, nice and relaxed, easy colors. So, tie of the week. Any, yeah, Michael.
How many ties do you have?
I'm guessing if I count the bow ties, probably about 83, 85.
Okay. So when you said you haven't done a repeat this year, I'm thinking, okay, well, it's only been 4 weeks this year, so hopefully you got more.
I brought back my political tie for the inauguration. That was the one repeat, because I thought that was the best day to do that one over again. Other than that, it's been a different tie since our first session last year. And anybody got anything they'd like to share from the last time we saw each other, 7 glorious days ago? Holly.
I'll share some. I've had a really weird week, and I guess this is just kind of my testimonial that you never know what the universe has planned for you. I still don't know the outcome, but I had about 5 different things that should not even be possible happen. I don't know their purpose. I don't know where they're going, but yeah, just a testimonial of always be on the lookout, because you never know what might be coming that you couldn't even anticipate.
Right. Well, I'm glad you made it here, though. Anybody else got anything they would like to share? Mike?
I do. Been busier than a one-legged man in a butt-kicking contest. Went from Tahoe to Cabo to San Diego. Drove back up here to Lake Tahoe 2 nights ago in the snow and ice. It was crazy. But we launched our first funnel, and it's a soft launch. So it's not fully launched, but that's called the closercode.net. And it will be up and running, which is exciting. And
Right.
hopefully big things to come.
Very cool. Did you want to put in a shameless plug because you deserve it?
I love these chocolates.
Right up?
Okay, no, it's not really too many plugs, I reckon, but hopefully we change the world as we know it. That's the plan. So,
And where can people go to find out the information on the teaser you just told them about?
the closercode.net, and it opens up a funnel. So it's pretty neat. Thank you.
Got it. And Mark?
I just wanted to, include Michael and Lenora, and I was talking about it earlier. It's a threat to our way of life. There's new, a new therapy modality. It's called cow cuddling, and for $75 an hour, you get to cuddle with a cow, and feel better, and stress and anxiety. It's becoming all the rage in New York City to travel out to the farm and cuddle with a cow for an hour. And it's a real thing.
That's right. You heard it here, folks. Hug a heifer for $75 an hour. Reduce your stress. Make sure if you talk about it in front of your wife, she understands we are talking about a different type of therapy. We don't want to start any fights. So, yeah, that's what we need, more cowbell. Hugging heifers with cowbells. Therapy all around. And like I told Mark, that fits right in, because you know somebody that understood hypnosis was the one that came up with that. Notice how good you feel as you hug the heifer. Notice the stress floating away. That's right. Ruminate over the old things and chew them like cud and just let them flow away. And we got people out in YouTube land, and those of you watching the recording going, what is, yeah. Welcome to a new week. Anything else before we jump into tonight's topics? Yes, no, maybe so? Well, then it's time. Tonight's topics: resentment cancer. Goals versus systems, and 40 apricots. So let's jump right in. Resentment, I've noticed, is definitely one of those energies, those things that will destroy relationships, will sit and linger on somebody's shoulder and other parts of their bodies. And if you have read or understood or have heard about the book, The Body Keeps the Score, it wouldn't surprise me if resentment was one of the top 10 designers or additives for cancer. There it is. The body keeps score. Absolutely. And in The Body Keeps the Score, to do the quickest summarization, they are learning more and more that up to as much as 80% of all sickness and disease is caused by repressed emotion. And one of the things about some of the emotions, some of them are flash in the pan, and some of them stick around for a lifetime. And so I brought up resentment on my phone for Merriam-Webster's dictionary and chose the cinnamon chooser. No, not cinnamon. Synonym and sugar. Cinnamon synonym chooser for resentment. And it came up with offense, resentment, umbrage, pique, dudgeon, or huff. Means an emotional response to or an emotional state resulting from a slight or an indignity. An offense implies hurt, displeasure, takes deep offense at certain things. Resentment suggests lasting indignation or ill will, harbored a lifelong resentment of this person. So resentment suggesting lasting indignation or ill will. And I think one of the challenges in our industry as agents of change is helping people out, especially with resentment. And there's a lot of stuff, of course, that can feed into this. And a lot of it, ironically, is belief systems, and I'm going to call it clouded memory or directed memory. A lot of the clients, when I get them to start describing these things that are causing resentment, when they describe it, they have their version right away. They tell you exactly what happened. But when I take them into trance and have them go back and review the recordings and change the audio a little bit, a good percentage of the time, it was a misunderstanding, or it wasn't nearly as offensive as they had built it up to be. And yet they've been carrying around all of this heavy weight, all this heavy energy of resentment ever since it happened. And the funny thing is, on a couple of times when we were able to do 3-chair, and a few of them even got brave enough to go talk to the person that this resentment over this situation was about. A couple of times when they talked to the person, guess what? The other person didn't even remember the event. That's how important it was. That's how much weight they've been carrying around. And yet, my client has been carrying such incredible anger and resentment and wishing ill will on this person that didn't even remember the event. We've heard it described for other things, but resentment right up in there is drinking poison with the hopes that the other person will get sick. And yeah, Michael, you're right. The heaviest thing to carry around in life is a grudge, aka resentment. I think grudge is probably the material, and resentment is the weight. Any other ways you think you could, Holly?
Oh gosh, I've got so many thoughts with this one. It's funny when before the meeting started, I said there was something I've been thinking about during the week, and I forgot what it was. This was actually it. So, it's funny. I am kind of the poster child for resentment, full disclosure. So I've been trying to work on it. But a couple things that have really come home to me throughout the week is, first of all, resentment comes from being entitled and believing the universe or another person owes us something. And so sometimes the question is, who am I to even think the person owed me anything in the first place? You know, it would have been nice if they'd given it to me, but I'm talking about like the owed they're going to pay. If they have a legal debt, okay, use legal means to enforce the debt, but you don't have to go to that extra level of, and they owe me something on top of that, something emotional on top of that. And so, you know, when I think of resentment, it's like, oh yeah, I was wronged. And it's like, was I wronged or what? Like, so one of the thoughts that came to me is, you know, what if I had been in the car with Ted Bundy? He'd offered to give me a ride and I was stupid enough to get in. And, you know, he said something insulting to me. And then years later, I found out I was in the car with Ted Bundy. Am I going to be mad that he said something insulting to me? Or am I going to be grateful that I got out of that car alive? You know, sometimes we get so caught up in these little tiny resentments. Another thought that came to me is a lot of times, like for example, a divorce. And I mean, this is not to say, you know, there's compassion there. There's, you know, all that. It's not that your pain doesn't count. But how many people have I watched that are going through a divorce that are so resentful and feeling like, because it's also that idea of I'm not being treated fairly, you know, who determined what fair is, whatever. And it's like, maybe you aren't being treated fairly. But how much, and this could also go, you know, it goes on a divorce, but it could also go with a really bad client if you're in business. How much money is it worth it to you to get this leech on your energy out of your life so that you can cut it off and stop letting them leech on your energy? We get so caught up in I've got to get what's owed to me that we keep these toxic people around that are never going to give us what we want anyway, because what we want is them to say, yeah, you're right, I'm sorry. The fact that they did it in the first place, they're probably not going to, or, maybe we misread the situation and it wasn't what we thought it was anyway. And the other thought that comes to my mind too is like, so say you're in a relationship and you're going through a divorce. What if that other person passed away? How are you, when you're worrying about child support and alimony, and how would you make that work? Because a lot of times it's like, well, I can't do it without this person. Well, if you can't do it without that person, and by the way, I'm not like judging. I'm sure it's hard, and that's not the point. But if you can't do it without that person, they could pass away. How are you going to do it then? You're going to have to find a way to make it work. So anyway, just a few thoughts to think about of when you have resentment, you're just basically emotionally tying yourself to the other person, and you're paying more in the cost of that emotional tie than what they quote unquote owed you in the first place anyway, if they even really did indeed owe you something anyway, which they might not. Mm-hmm. So, and they don't necessarily owe you anything. Who says the universe owes you something nice and people being courteous to you? What if the whole point was you're being thrown into a situation to see what you can learn from it and what you can survive? And this was actually a gift in disguise because it was teaching you about yourself and helping you discover what triggers you so that you can get over it. Anyway.
That's the one right there. Is a lot of people, especially those that come to us, are so burdened down, and sometimes they don't even understand what it is that is getting them down. They just feel that weight of the energy, of the anger, of the judgment, of all the things that they're feeling because of their whatever justification they use. And there's, we always say at least 3 solutions to every event, situation, or problem that may occur. But with resentment, sometimes they know exactly what it is. Sometimes they just know that this person bugs the heck out of them, and they don't like them. Some of them have even forgotten why. I just hate that person. Why? I don't remember. It's obviously that important. And so finding a way to release that and move on is not only good for the release of the weight, but good for your health. Mark.
I was squirrel that started running around when you brought up the topic. I was thinking, what is the opposite of resentment? And that might be appreciation. A lack of appreciation. That whatever you're doing for the other person isn't valued, and that could, So I was thinking, well, the opposite of of resentment might, in one way might be appreciation. Lack of appreciation can lead to that feeling of resentment. This person isn't valuing me. I'm putting into the relationship, or what I'm putting into the into the situation, and that could be a way to again conceptualize it as but yeah, that squirrel wouldn't let go, so I had to mention it.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because squirrels, and for those of you that are tuning in, you're like, squirrels. Yes, we deal with squirrels here all the time. My squirrels have squirrels that know squirrels. And one of my squirrels brought up, if you think of all the different locations and situations where resentment can cause a problem, you'll understand how dangerous it can be even more. One place that popped up was work. I asked for a raise and didn't get it. And if that wasn't handled properly, pretty soon that little cancer resentment starts sliding in. Somebody borrowed one of my tools and brought it back broken or damaged or dirty. They didn't respect my stuff. Yeah, another great title, Mind Virus. Good one, Mark. And if you don't get control of this stuff early enough, it can lead to some pretty deep issues. Now, I've talked to a couple of people that had started having serious resentment for their place of employment. And I said, either you go and you address it and you fix it, or you start looking for another job, because if it's not going to get better on its own. Holly.
Sorry, I keep talking every time, but another thought that just popped into my head is resentment almost always comes from having weak boundaries. Because when we have strong boundaries and good confidence, and we know we can hold those boundaries, and somebody crosses our boundaries, it's just like, okay, well, I know what the consequence is for that behavior. I'm going to give the consequence for that behavior, whatever that may be. And now I'm fine because the consequence happened. Or, and maybe that consequence is this person's out of my life forever, or, whatever it may be. And then if somebody's like, say they disrespect me, maybe they make fun of my weight or, something like that. It's also knowing, hey, that says more about them than it does about me. And then the other, sorry, one more thing. But I was thinking about the 4 horsemen, and John Gottman talks about that destroy relationships. Resentment isn't on that list, but it very quickly leads to just about everything on that list. So.
Now here's a test. Do you remember what the 4 are?
We've got contempt, stonewalling, criticism, and defensiveness. Did I say that one already? You can tell my chunk size is 3. Defensiveness, criticism, stonewalling, contempt.
There you go. Michael, you want to share what you just put in there?
I was actually Googling it after Mark talked about it, and 2 little pigeons popped up, and also a little stegosaurus. And the antonyms for resentment are delight, happiness, pleasure, kindness, love, joy, friendliness, sympathy, contentment, and goodwill.
Makes for an interesting mirror, doesn't it?
I think we all need more goodwill.
Yes. And so that's why I titled it Resentment Cancer. I think the longer and I ain't gonna lie, I've dealt with resentment myself. I think it's all part of the human experience. And I know that the longer I let it go, the stronger it got. The angrier I got, the more resentment I felt. Until I was able to go in and deal with it and clear it up. I haven't found it, I could be wrong, but I haven't seen it just magically clear itself up. So if you are out there and you're dealing with it, or you know somebody, have them reach out to one of us. It's worth it to get that weight off of you, get that energy out so that you can move forward lighter, easier, living life the way you should. Any other ahas, epiphanies, additions to this one? Lenora popped in. Anybody got thoughts for when a part refuses to forgive or learn anything other than to never let it happen again? I think with that, you have to dig down a little deeper to figure out the values and criteria of what was offended. What was the offense? Why is it so important to make sure that you don't release that or forgive that other than just obtaining the lessons? Most of the time, if you can convince the subconscious that the lessons are intact, it'll allow you to let go and move forward. If it's afraid that we have to, if we don't hang on to the entire experience and keep all the bad and all the good and all the bad and all the bad, the lesson won't be strong enough to protect us. And so we have to address that further then. Michael.
So this resentment cancer, hands lowered, good. Yes, stems from lack of communication. And if you look at the way our society has been encouraged to compartmentalize and subdivide every nuance of our lives, we put up a whole fake persona on the internet, but we're not having family dinner or meeting with our friends or going outside.
Yes.
And everybody's so offended. So if we go back in time when we were growing up, TJ, we were told, hey man, shake it off. Is this going to matter a year from now? Is it going to matter 2 years from now? So how important is this energy that you're putting into this situation really? It's not that big a deal. It's not going to change your life. You didn't just amputate a piece of your body, or you weren't in a severe life-altering accident. It was somebody said something that you mistook and it hurt your feelings.
Yep.
And now you have resentment. So it's important, communication.
And to go even further against the grain of the day, what else were we told?
Don't talk about religion. Don't talk about politics. Don't talk about people's weight.
And if it's that bad, take it outside.
Yeah.
And we did. And how many times were we out? Parents didn't know where we were. And they, remember that when you and I were growing up, Michael, what did they say at 10 o'clock on the news? 10 p.m. It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are? And today they'd be like, what? But back then it was free range parenting. So we were out there as kids and had to learn to deal with conflict and hurt feelings and all the above. And if somebody really ticked you off,
Yeah.
fool around, find out.
Mess with the bull, gonna get the horn.
Yep. Holly.
So this is kind of a response to Lenore's question specifically about that situation where we don't ever want to let it happen again, but we can't seem to get past it beyond that. So my first thought is we're never in a situation where we can stop something from never happening again. The only thing we can do is determine that next time it happens, we're going to respond differently. And how can we respond differently? And a lot of times that's what it is we haven't thought that through. I've said this one many times, but with our boundaries, be, sweet with your tone and ruthless with your actions. Don't be sweet with your actions and ruthless with your tone. And oftentimes we'll look back at the way we responded and we didn't have a boundary. We hadn't communicated it properly. We hadn't decided what the proper consequences were for violating that boundary. And so we came unglued and then we let them walk all over us in some way or hurt us in some way. And what we're feeling is, hey, I got hurt. I wasn't honored. I need my pain to be witnessed. I need to understand what happened. I need to process it so that next time I'm not the one who gets hurt. And that's completely fine. And the other thing we sometimes feel is guilty that we came unglued. Because since we weren't able to find a way to shut it down, we weren't able to find a way to enforce the boundary, we actually feel guilty because we did respond from this place of fear, anger, frustration, whatever it may be, that we weren't able to enforce the boundary. So first of all, I think it's okay to give yourself space. Forgiveness is a process. It's not a moment. It's not a thing that you do right this second. And I mean, based on your definition of forgiveness too, like that doesn't mean restoration of trust. There's a lot of things that doesn't mean. But it's great that we can reframe what happened. Maybe it didn't happen the way we thought it did. It's great that we can say, resentment is drinking poison and hoping the other person will die. All that's true. But until we take a moment to honor ourselves and also to strategize, okay, if and when this happens again, and maybe it won't, you could strategize it and then put it out there that it will never happen again. But the number one way to have it not happen again this is part of the process of learning the lesson. It's to figure out what's my better strategy next time. And then often the universe will say, oh, you've learned that. You don't need to experience this again. But if all you do is just freak out and cry and, that feeling means something. It's the light on your dashboard telling you something's wrong, something needs attention. It's not meant to be, you're not supposed to feel shame that you're feeling it. It's not meant to be pushed down. It's meant to be, you're supposed to pay attention to it and say, yeah, okay, something's wrong. How are we going to address this? And, some people, and what's, depending on the situation, if you're, in a concentration camp, maybe it's you go to where Viktor Frankl said is the only power left to me is to determine how I'm going to respond to the situation. But also to recognize, is there something in this process that highlighted what I think is a genuine criticism? Maybe 90% of it was wrong, but 10% of it hit a sore spot because I actually think that's genuine. And maybe I need to dive in and say, is this genuine? And if so, what can I do about it? Or have I been calling it genuine, but it really isn't genuine?
Great perspective. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else got any ahas, epiphanies, comments to add to this? Bueller? And a little reminder for those of you that are watching on YouTube, join us. We would love to hear your thoughts and comments on this as well. And don't worry, you don't even have to know how to spell NLP. I'm sure some of you have some ideas, some thoughts that you could share with us, and we would love to hear them. But if we got no more on this, I got 20 minutes to add 2 more topics. So with your permission, we're going to move on to topic number 2, goals and systems. And this one came from an Instagram reel that I saw, and it regarded a quote. And the quote was, "We don't rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems." And that one's accredited to James Clear. So I'll read it again. "We don't rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems." And I thought this was super appropriate now that we are pretty much 1 month into 2025. that fabulous month where everybody made all these New Year's resolutions and all of these promises to themselves again. And chances are there's Atomic Habits by James Clear. Cool. There's a good chance that some of the people out there, have already decided that, well, maybe next year. Because again, we don't rise to the level of our goals. And as far as I'm concerned, a New Year's resolution, a lot of times, all they are is just a goal spoken out with no support system put in place. And so when we think about that, we don't rise to the level of our goals, but we fall to the level of our systems. I actually discussed this with one of my clients today. And I said, well, it's like being in San Diego and New Year's comes around and you're like, I'm going to go to San Francisco for whatever reason. How probable does that sound when it's stated that way? Okay, well, I'm going to go to the wharf in San Francisco. Okay, that's a little better, but still not quite there. I'm going to go to 7211 West Front Street, Southeast, San Francisco. Okay, well, that's a defined goal, but there's something missing. How do you plan on getting there? What is your system? What is your strategy? Are you walking? Are you biking? You taking a car? Are you going to fly? Are you going to rent a car? Are you going to get on a bus? What is your system that you're going to put in place? And one of the cool things that they pointed out on the Instagram reel was a system can be something you only do once a week, even once a month, as long as you have the system set in place to get to your goal. Michael.
So I studied a long time ago an entrepreneurship program, and basically it defined what you're talking about right now. And so what it did, it said, in a nutshell, TJ, I'm going to give you $1 million if you can get to this house in Hawaii in the next 2 days. But you have to get inside the house and open the envelope in order to collect the $1 million. Now, most people would say, I'm in, immediately and say, okay, I'll do it. But what they need to do is ask the deeper questions. What island in Hawaii? Where specifically in Hawaii? What's the address? Is there an alarm on the house? Is there a key? Do I need a key to get into the house? How do I get into the gate? Are there guard dogs? Is it Magnum's house? But if you have the plan and you understand the exact steps that you need to do, then it's easier to get to the goal. So.
Exactly. And if somebody gave you 3 hours to chop down a tree, what do the smart people do?
Spend the first 2 hours and 45 minutes sharpening my axe.
Exactly. Not only sharpening the axe, but looking at how is the tree standing? How thick is the tree? Is it a pine tree? Is it an oak tree? Is it leaning somewhere? Where is it going to land? What might it land on? And that becomes your system. And so again, for those of you that are out there, or if you know somebody who made a resolution and they may have considered themselves to have already failed or have already given up. This is the time where you ask them, how defined was your goal? Was it vague or was it specific? And what system did you put in place to make sure that you accomplished this goal? It's not too late. It's never too late. Usually, okay, never is a big word. But if you still have the goal in mind, you may simply need to reword, redo the system to get there. The one time I went to San Francisco, we drove from San Diego to San Francisco. I wouldn't do that again. Do you know why? We have airplanes. We rented a car. We didn't even take one of our cars. We rented a car and drove it from San Diego to San Francisco. And those of you that live out in San Diego, if you're wondering what year that was the year that San Diego had that extended, we're going to call it brownout, blackout, where the power went out. We managed to get out of town just in time. Had no idea because we were on the road driving. And there were friends of ours who were also going to join us, but they had one major challenge. There were no flights because there was no radar, and there was no gas to fill up on because there was no electricity to run the pumps. And so when their flight got canceled, they were going to get in the vehicle and realize that they didn't have enough fuel. They weren't sure if they had enough fuel in their vehicles to get outside of the power outage area to fuel up. And they had never thought of that situation before. And chances are they're still resenting not being prepared for that because they missed a couple of days of fun on that trip. Any input, ahas, epiphanies on goals versus systems? Yes, no, maybe so. And I think you're right, Michael. It's in that 2010, 2011. I could look it up on my files to see when I was there, but it was somewhere in there. Well, we might actually finish a little ahead of schedule. We're going to find out. We're going to move on to the third topic of the evening, 40 apricots. Anybody want to take a stab at what this might be? Yes, Michael.
Okay, so when I was looking for the link to get on your page this evening, I saw cancer, and resentment and apricot seeds. And so I'm going, all right, he's going to put the cure to cancer because the apricot seeds are a cure to cancer. Hey, I have all blondish hair, so, you know. And we find what we look for.
Yes.
I sent a text to my buddy. I'm like, because I'm trying to get him to join the chat. I'm like, dude, we're going to talk about cancer and cures and apricot seeds.
And there are people that were almost asleep out in YouTube land that just went,
What?
what?
Yep.
Well, not quite.
Okay.
This came from the other night. I was going through some stuff and came across this lady from England, a comedian, and kind of dry humor, but she does it extremely well. And I should have written down her name, and I didn't. But she was telling the story how she's out with a friend of hers, and her friend gets this dessert, and it has some orange stuff on it. And so she's inquiring, well, what's the orange stuff? Is it carrot? No. Is it orange? Nope. Tangerine? No, nothing like that. Well, I'm all out of orange. What is it? And finally her friend goes, oh, it's apricot. And she goes, oh, good thing I didn't try that. I'm very allergic to apricots. And her friend goes, really? What happens if you eat some apricot? She goes, oh, I get the runs really bad. And her friend's like, ooh, yeah, no, that's not good. So how did you find out that you were so allergic to apricots? And she said, well, one day I ate 40 of them. And she said, and as soon as I said that, I had an epiphany. I'm not allergic to apricots. I'm allergic to 40 apricots. And it made, of course, she said it so hilariously, I'm cracking up, but it made me think about how many things do people misjudge that we're allergic to, but it's taken out of context. One of them that hit me was narcissists. Ask anybody. Oh, narcissist. Oh, I hate them. Until I point out that every one of us that's alive has a level of narcissism in us. We need it to survive. So it's not the little bit of narcissism. It's the person that has 40 narcissism in them that we don't like, that we're allergic to. And I think narcissism has become the latest catchphrase, keyword. Oh, he's a narcissist. And no level rating. And I think a lot of it is because they don't understand completely the phrase of it, or the meaning or the definition of what a true narcissist is. And for my people that are going through Triple P, the Perfect Partner Protocol, I've had a few of them write down, and they can't be a narcissist. And so now I know that I have to let them know what level. And Elijah asked, what is a true narcissist? And I'm sure there's going to be a number of definitions, and I've got a couple of researchers here that could look it up while I'm coming up with my best definition of narcissist. But I think it comes to the point where me first comes so strongly that your feelings and situations will always be second or third or less. And I think we've all run across those types of people. And I hate to say it, but I think the funniest ones are we're going to call them recovering narcissists. The ones that have had it pointed out to them that they are just narcissists, and they're trying to recover, and they're like, all right, fine, whatever, fine, tell me your side of the story. Okay, that's enough. Because when I was that way, oh, I interrupted you again. Well, I'm sorry, but just okay. Back to you. Oh, Thursday. Yeah, I know. Thursday. I was at so and. Or why don't you give me your jacket? I'm cold. Well, I know you're cold too, but it's pretty mean of you to watch me be cold while you're wearing a jacket. So where are my researchers up on the definition of narcissist? Oh, there we go. Just like that. Two kinds of narcissists: those who just are considered to have a narcissistic personality, and those who qualify for actual narcissistic personality disorder. For the lesser narcissists, there are also several subtypes, but for narcissistic disorder, criteria is on the way. And the funny part is, anytime I hear disorder pop behind a title, it always cracks me up. Kind of like Mark put in, a friend of mine once described himself as a serial narcissist. So he's narcissistic towards cereal, hates Cocoa Puffs. Whatever.
Apparently, it's too many characters. I'm cutting it down.
So again, as I understand it, and this is my story and I'm sticking to it until I'm proven otherwise, we all have a level of narcissism in our personality. It's what helps us stay alive. We have to have it to make sure that we take care of ourselves enough to survive another day. Let's see, here we go. Must exhibit at least 5 of the following traits consistently across various situations: grandiosity, entitlement, interpersonal relationships, and emotional dysregulation. I dated her once. Oh, wait a minute. Let's not make this personal. What else we got, Holly? We got has an exaggerated.
There's a lot here, but
yes,
yeah.
Has an exaggerated sense of self-importance, preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, beauty, or ideal love. Believes they are special and unique and can only be understood by or should associate with other people or institutions, special people or institutions, and requires excessive admiration. I think that and there's more. Entitlement, feels entitled to special treatment or automatic success, exploits others to achieve their own goals, lacks empathy, and is unwilling to recognize or identify with the feelings of others. Well, you guys get an idea of, I'm sure we have all experienced somebody who has some level of those. And just like with 40 apricots, if they have a little bit of this, good. They're kind of like we are. I have no problem with somebody that like to would like to have a little admiration or believe they're kind of special and unique. That would be half an apricot. When you eat 40 in one sitting, things are going to happen. And when things happen around people like that, there's a good chance some resentment may follow. And if your goal is to get over that, you should probably put some type of system in place to work on it. And that tops off our number 1. Any ahas, epiphanies, inputs before we open up the floodgates to all the amazing questions and topics that you guys have been chomping at the bit to share with all of us? Relax, settle down, not all at once. For those of you that are watching for the first time, the way we work here on Triple T is you just experienced hour 1, where I go through the 3 topics that I found for the week. And now we move into hour number 2, where anybody on the call can bring up a question or a topic, and everybody on the call gets to answer first. And Mark has his hand up. Mark.
Yeah, I was question I came listening to all the political rhetoric and again the
I'm sorry.
that again I my question is I'd taken the training with Dr. David and learned some of the hypnotic language, and I'm just surprised that politicians don't have people like Dr. David to write their speeches for them. Because if you just stop and realize and recognize that hypnotists, they use language in such a phenomenal way to, change beliefs and get people to, get on the side. You can easily and naturally recognize that, that voting for this candidate is the best decision that you could possibly make. And you can agree with that now, can't you? Goes in, and that was my limping rendition of what he taught me. And using hypnotic, I'm just surprised they don't use it more. They use little pieces of it. Put your hand out to the audience, and so that you're, taking their hand. Again, if politicians would use hypnotic language, I think it'd be hell of a lot more effective, their speech, and it could. Anyways, it would be interesting. So I don't know why. My question is, I don't know why more people don't, or more politicians don't use, Dr. David to write their speeches for them. Just wanted everybody's input on that.
Okay, I'm going to go against my rules here a little bit. I'm going to talk first. We're going to try to keep this as politically neutral as possible in this very volatile times that we are. But they do use it quite a bit. And yeah, we could cover that in a less public venue, but yeah, it's used a lot more than people believe. Holly.
I will agree with most of what I'd say. I'd probably say in a less public setting, and I do also agree that it's used more than people realize. But just kind of a funny story. If you go out there, there's actually a paper that says that Obama trained with Dr. David Snyder. So I know it's factually inaccurate, but I just had to share that.
I remember when somebody brought that up, and even David was like, "He did? Well, that explains some things." Well, unfortunately, I'm going to make this one short-lived only because I don't need a firestorm set up. Can we move on to another one? Even though we could talk about this for about 3 hours. Holly.
Okay, I've got a completely different question. So for those of you who've taken face reading, you might be familiar with the idea that when someone has, so for women, it's on the right ear, and men, it's on the left ear, but there's a trait where the ear on the part of the ear map that's for, conception to birth, if that part is really thin, it talks about, when your biological parents were pregnant with you, that the thickness of that is basically how much they wanted you in life. And one of the things that Lillian mentions is that if that part is really thin, that when you're giving somebody compliments, rather than complimenting them on features that they have, you want to compliment them on things they've accomplished, if that makes sense. So that's where I was coming from. And I just kind of had a thought. Does anyone have any ideas? My first thought is, womb of eternity, but ideas on how we could go about actually clearing that trait and maybe turning it into its opposite. I mean, obviously it's good to know, yeah, I'm going to compliment this person on the things they've accomplished rather than on who they are. So rather than telling them, you're so beautiful, I'll compliment them, oh, wow, you ran a marathon, if that makes sense. But rather than just, working with the trait, what are any of your ideas? And specifically, I'm trying to think of something that I could maybe do as a recording. So I might not be in person with that person. So I'm just kind of curious what techniques you would use if you weren't in person with that person to help them clear that trait, if that makes sense.
Lenora.
Oh, I have a lot of insights about setup for these. What I find the most important is the setup and helping them understand who's talking in there. Are you talking to them? Or are they talking to themselves? Because that will help them make that connection even more and receive it even more. Also, and this is where I think affirmations aren't always consistent because it depends on the voice and the headspace that you're in. So if your energy is clear and you are in a good space and you have that higher version of you focused, and you can then have this conversation and build that connection with that younger self, even having the higher version and the present self going to the younger self, even in the womb, even in the crib, building that connection of love will then expand and build upon those accolades that are being reinforced or that you're wanting to reinforce for that person.
Great answer. Who else has something to add to that? Mark.
So I want to apologize for touching the third rail. Politics and religion we have to stay clear of. But as far as the ears, I've watched the the face reading video, so I'm not too I don't feel like I have, but if there's something that you see there, in the shape of the ear, I thought it was, and I'm probably mistaken, but that it could be a trait, but I always thought that it was, a malformation of the ear is like some kind of a recorded trauma early in their lives. And, but if you're, Ollie's obviously better at, the face reading thing than I am, but I thought it was more of a recorder of the past. And, um, if you are detecting certain traits, I mean, the face obviously has a lot of, and I think it's repeated expressions that we form over the course of our lives that cause the face to wrinkle in certain ways. The trauma, the nurturing, all the things that you pick up with face reading. But if somebody is showing a trait like nurturing, but I think that gives you a clue to um, you know where to what to address and how the years I was I knew that they were orders of your early your early experiences, but yeah, if you find like a trait um, that that again I would not that I would I don't use it too much frankly, but but it would be a something to note and maybe to open up a dialogue about it. That's just my thought, you know. Okay.
Cool. Anybody else? One thing I was going to add to this is I think if you didn't mention the reason or how you came up with it, if you were to see that trait in their ear, it might be interesting for you to ask them first, read the rim of their ear, see if there's anything that may indicate siblings. But if you see the thinning trait that you were talking about, Holly, ask them if they're the oldest, if they're the firstborn. Were they planned? Or were you surprise? And it may not be that it was so much that they didn't want you, they just weren't prepared. Or if it turns out that they have siblings but they're the last one born, surprise! They thought they were all done, and now they're trying to figure out. I know a family where 4 kids, and the youngest one was a senior in high school. They already had grandkids. And then, surprise! And I bet if I were to inspect the ears of that youngest child, there would be a high possibility of that trait written on their ear. And so I think we have to take some of these readings with the quote unquote grain of salt and figure out how the rest of the life may or may not have been affected by how it started. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense, yeah.
And again, if they're bothered by it, this would be a good time for them to reach out to somebody like us to help them clear up their belief systems as to what may have happened. Because your past doesn't define who you are, especially your future. It just defines how you got here and the information how the information showed up to a certain point. Good topic. Anybody else got anything to add? Yes, no? Then I guess it's time for a new question or topic. Who's got something for us? Come on. I know some of you have been around for a while, so you know this is not a shock that there will be question and topic time in the second hour. Mark.
Yeah, I just got a invitation to an autism symposium, and the whole topic of autism is loading. The incidence of it is increased exponentially, and my question is, again, how I've worked with a bunch of autistic people for my career, and I'm just wondering, like I said, how you guys would, I think that they're inwardly focused, and and I think you have to establish a rapport to get them to, step over that low wall that they've put around themselves, into. Autism seems to be a hugely growing problem, and I just wanted to hear how people would deal with, clients with autism.
Excellent question. Who's got an answer? Holly.
I'll dive right in here. So just a few suggestions. So first of all, what we do could be very, very relevant to autism, because one thing that just about everyone on the autism spectrum has is they have certain senses turned up, certain senses turned down. And we've got very simple ways of fixing that, whether you want to use, the magic frame or whatever. So one of the first things I might do is just show them that they can play with that. And I think that right there could be so life-changing that you're going to have them hooked from minute one. A couple things just to keep in mind. So one is the fact that they might have certain sensitivities, and, be mindful and respectful of that. So, maybe no like sudden large sounds you might have with somebody else, or, be aware that if they're going crazy, it might have nothing to do with you. It might be that they're seeing the lights blink in a way that you can't see. And then just also keep in mind, people who are on the autism spectrum tend to think very literally. And so Temple Grandin, you may have read her books, but she'll talk about, if you say to a neurotypical person the word church, they think of an abstract idea of church, and it can apply to many different examples. Whereas with her, she thinks of a specific church. And then if you start going to different situations, she's going to have to change that image of a church more than a normal person would. So, kind of going into David Snyder teaching stuff, the adverb adjective presupposition, where he talks about making sure you describe what you want very clearly, that can be doubly helpful for someone who's on the autism spectrum, making sure you get those adjectives in front of what you're describing. So, if you use a lot of imprecise language, they may not follow where you're going. And then just one final thing, this is just a personal theory that I can't prove, but I have a suspicion that people on the autism spectrum are more likely to sort for difference before they sort for similarities. So for those of you who haven't taken NLP, if you have, 3 blue circles and 2 orange circles, and you ask somebody to tell you the first thing they notice about it, someone who sorts for similarities is going to say they're all circles. Somebody who sorts for differences first, the first thing they're going to notice is, 2 are orange, 4 are blue, just as an example. And I know that might be a little bit hard to wrap your mind around, but the reason why that matters is something I'm noticing is that when someone who sorts for difference notices the difference, someone who sorts for similarity thinks they're being difficult. They're not being difficult. They don't see difference as a bad thing. It's just that they're sorting things in a different way. So if you get a lot of feeling of, oh, these people are arguing with me, or no, they just, A, they need to be really, really accurate, or they can't follow the conversation. They need to get all the facts pinned down. And B, they might be sorting for difference first. So yeah, show grace and assume best intent when people start questioning rather than assuming they're trying to be difficult.
Great answer. Great information. Thank you for sharing that. Mark.
I remember I think it was something I got during school. There was did a eye tracking experiment with people with that were on the autistic spectrum. And, they had a scene from Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, if any black and white movie. And the two people, the actors, are in a closet, and the man's got a shotgun, and there's a light bulb with the string going back and forth in the closet. They were tracking the people that, tracking the autistic people watching the movie. And, there was a lot of emotion. I mean, it was a very intense emotional scene. When they looked at what the autistic people were tracking, they were tracking the string going back and forth with their eyes. And, sometimes they don't get the emotional context because I don't think they focus on facial expression. And I always found that to be, again, you have to get them to, that they don't pick up on facial expression and what the commensurate feelings would be inside the other person. So, yeah, like I said, that was helpful. Thank you, Holly. I just, I'm always trying to, learn new things.
Awesome. Holly.
Sorry, I'm so glad you brought that up. It did remind me of something else to think of too. So first of all, people who are on the autism spectrum are as likely to be interested in things as people. And so because of that, their brains are wired. One of the reasons why they often will not be looking at your emotional expression is, one, they're just completely blind to it. But also keep in mind, many people on the autism spectrum experience something called auditory processing disorder, which means that their ears focus fine. They can hear all the sounds, but a normal person, when they hear human speech and background noise, they prioritize human speech and they pull it out. The brain pulls it out. Where someone on the autism spectrum has a lot more trouble, and just the tiniest bit of background noise can make it so that they can't understand what you're saying. And that often will lead them to have to look at your mouth because they're trying to lip read while listening at the same time. And that's another reason they might often miss any facial expressions that you're doing outside, because they're focused so hard on just trying to hear your words that the idea of seeing any of the facial expressions or anything beyond that is completely beyond what they're literally capable of doing. So anyway.
And I'm so glad you brought that up. That's part of the reason why when I work with certain clients, I have them wear headphones, because I work 100% virtual. And so if I'm working with a client with that, I will also tend to get in closer to the camera. So like you pointed out, Holly, they can not only see my face, but a lot of the distraction in back will be covered. And I may, depending on the client, I may even bring in a green screen to do a solid background so that all the attention is here. When I had my photography studio, I ended up kind of being known as the photographer for the autistic group there, because they all know each other, especially in a small area like I grew up in. And when I had clients come in that were autistic to my studio, I spoke very little to them. It was all gestures and watching them, and they're watching me in order to take the pictures. So we learn how to work around, and if anybody has any questions, we're a community. Reach out and ask for input, advice, and that's why we have Triple T, is to bring up these ideas and share our experiences. So a great topic. I'm glad you brought it up. Anybody else got anything they want to share? Maybe another question or topic? Lenore.
Mark, I was just curious if you were specifically talking about adults or children or both, actually.
I've found I've worked with, children and adults, and no, like I said, they seem to, I agree with Holly. Like I said, a lot of times I think at a very early age, they're not able to attenuate all the data, all the visual and auditory data. They don't have the ability to, and I think that they can't sort it, like TJ was saying, and I think that causes them to shut down. They only have, it's like a camera aperture, TJ. It's like it's either wide open and it's overwhelming, or it's shut off and they close the aperture so that it's too overwhelming for them. I don't think they, for whatever reason, they don't have that ability to, be like Holly was saying, they can't pick out, in a noisy environment, they can't pick out, they can't, like most of us do, is pick out our name, crowded room. If someone says it, we sort the data. They just have that aperture wide open all the time, and it's very overwhelming for them to, and I think that's something that, kids have, on the spectrum, and I think that adults have the same problem, but I think they've learned, some more coping mechanism, how to shut out, that overwhelming, data flood of visual and auditory data. But they don't have the ability to reduce the size of the aperture, because really our senses are designed to keep stuff out, not to let stuff in, and they just don't have that ability. But yes.
Depending on the age or depending on who it is, I will actually inquire about what their nutrition is, but also very specifically how they slept the night before, what else they were experiencing during the day, to set that appointment up for as much success as possible. So I don't know what other things you're doing or if those were things to consider, but those were where my thoughts were going.
I don't know. Like I said, it's again, that I was working with one family that had an autistic little girl, and call her Mary, and Mary, again, they want to be social, but they don't have the skill set. So Aunt Mary would go out with the other kids, and the hand would go up, and she'd bonk one of the kids over the head, and pretty soon the other kids didn't want to play with her. She was trying to do something social, but have the skill set. So I taught them that 1, 2, 3 magic, and it worked like gangbusters, because when mom and dad saw his hand go up, they said, "Mary, that's one." Mary would turn, run to the parent who said that, and and very little speech, but she put her hand over the parent's mouth and go, "Don't count, mommy, don't count." That took about 2 or 3 weeks, and problem solved. But that but like I said, I think they have the same. The kids have the same intense desire to socialize, but they don't have the skill set to do so. So they do
Yeah.
can learn inappropriate, you know, ways of doing it. So, but yeah, like I said, that was, again, that was just one experience I had. So working with, I feel that, high functioning, autistic people, they make great coders because really they just want to be left alone in a closet, and and they're so focused inwardly that they, they, like I said, they've learned how to shut all that out and just focus. And they, I don't know. Like I said, it's, again, it's a rising epidemic of incidents. When I was a kid, it was like, I don't know, one of 1,000 kids, 2,000 were, were led to be diagnosed autistic. Now it's like 1 in 50, really facing a, getting to crisis proportion, with the ASD population. We have to learn more and more effective ways of helping them.
Yep. Holly.
Sorry, everything that keeps coming up keeps making me think of other things too. Something else to when you're working with someone who has autism spectrum disorder or ADHD, which apparently about 1/3 of both populations have both. So that's why I talk about that one. But they say people who have either of those conditions, they estimate on average has experienced 18,000 more rejections by the age of 18 than their peers, which, it's like, oh, that's a long period. But if you divide that out, that's more than 3 a day for their whole life. Which is not that many. I mean, when you consider everybody experiences rejection, but so a lot of them will also be hypersensitive to rejection. But the interesting thing is to reverse that trend, they did a study and they tried all sorts of different things. And they found the thing that worked, bizarrely, the most was forcing the parents to go to the counseling and to start interacting with each other more. Because they tried it with the kids and they tried it without the kids, but they had the parents go to basically a parent support group where they had to socialize with each other a lot and also talk about their situation. And the parents getting that support translated to the kids, whether the kids were there or not. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Good insights. I'd like to actually hear a little more about that. Anybody else got anything they want to add, or we've got 27 minis left. So if we're done on that, does anybody have another question or topic? Really? Lenora?
I didn't know if you were wanting to hear more from Holly, so that's why I was pausing.
Well, if we don't have anything to add, then
I mean, we can go deep down that rabbit hole, but maybe I'll do a little bit more research, and if somebody asks next week, I'll give a lot more detail. I'll have to refresh myself on the science and the details of the experiment and stuff. But if you want to know more, what's his name? Dr. Russell Barkley, I think is his name, has a video where he goes over the research into it. It's really fascinating.
That is quite interesting.
Very cool.
I was circling back. It's actually really funny, guys. So I do take notes in my phone. In addition to all the journals that I have, I do take notes in my phone. And one of them was just a really, really long running list. And as I'm going through this, and guys, I'm talking like I must have made this like 4 years ago and started it and just kept doing it as like a quick note to myself. And like a good half of these have actually come true as to whether it was like, hey, complete this, or this is what you're manifesting, or this is what you're working on, and ask people about this, ask people about that, because I just kept stacking stuff on top of each other. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Thoughts on, or have you done, I know we talked a little bit about resentment earlier, timelining resentment. Any thoughts on it?
Great topic. Who's got some info on that? Really? Nobody? Crickets? Holly.
I haven't done that directly. I love the idea. I have done some cases though. So part of the reason I keep talking about, you need to have your pain witnessed, you need to process whatever. A lot of this comes from a book that I've listened to, I don't know how many times in the past couple weeks, but it's called, is it The Sixth Stage of Grief? By David Kessler, I think. Let me just double check. That's the name of it. And it talks about Finding Meaning, The Sixth Stage of Grief by David Kessler. And one of the things he talks about is the importance that a lot of people think that they're just supposed to, grief starts on day one, and by day two, now I've found meaning, which is that last step, which not everybody always gets to, but it is the step that helps the most. But he talks about we need to make space for all of the other steps. We need to make space for, processing. We need to make space for healing. We need to make space for, getting through our anger, getting through our understanding, all that sort of stuff. And one of those steps is you need to have your grief witnessed at some point. And if you don't feel like you've had any of those steps happen, getting to meaning is going to feel painful. It's going to feel insulting, and the body's just not ready to do it yet. And one of the things also that talks about, this doesn't, even if the thing that happened to you wasn't real, the feelings are real, the process still needs to be real. So that final step of meaning might be, hey, what I thought happened didn't happen. But in order to get to that place, the first place I need to say is whether it happened or not, my hurt was real. And, what can I do to feel better about this in the future? Anyway, but I think it would be absolutely fascinating to put that on the timeline and express, you could spread out the time so that you could still have the space to do it. But if, say, it's coming up at places that are inappropriate, like it's always showing up at work or whatever, you could do a timeline manipulation where you give yourself space between work and, when you get home or whatever, to give yourself space to process. But the one thing that did come up to my mind that I have done is sending somebody back in time to witness the grief, to witness the pain, and have that person walk with them on their timeline. So that's the closest I've ever come to it. But I definitely want to experiment with it even more because I love that idea.
What a great use of timeline. Again, that's why we're here. Mark.
Yeah, that's a great facet that I've never considered. I've used timeline a lot when I've done hypnosis, to clear up the junk in our past. And if you can, because there's a lot of, I'm sure there's dark spots on everybody's timeline, and when you clean up all the stuff in the past, again, you're obviously everybody here knows that your neurology is good at recording it and recalling it, but not getting rid of it. So when you do the timeline therapy, you can clean up a lot of stuff, and I had never thought of adding that in, of letting all that, as the timeline begins to glow, lighting up the horizon and all those darker areas, those less than positive things just go away using timeline. Past resentment can also be another one to add in there. That's a great idea. Great info.
Yep. Holly.
I just had one other thought too. Another really important thing to do too is see if the grieving process is on the timeline or if it's at the side of the timeline. Because if it's not on the timeline, that might be why they can't get through it.
Another great insight. Anybody else got anything they would like to add on timelining resentment?
Yeah, rewrite it if you don't like it.
Yeah, exactly. I've used timeline and going back a number of times for resentment. One was to inspect what actually happened from an outside view, to allow the client to be able to view the episode that they recorded from an outside view to see if it actually went down the way they've been telling the story for so long. And a number of times they found out that that's why am I seeing it differently? Because of what do we call it? The grapevine. I heard it through the grapevine anomaly. Even with ourselves, we can tell a story over and over and believe that it's true, and then have somebody else who was there going, that's not how it went. You're like, what? No. So there's a very good chance that the story we've been telling, the one that's been causing all the resentment, may not even be accurate, even though we're the ones that are telling it. And so using timeline is a good way to go back and check that out. And then once you clear it up, you can do future pacing to go back over the time from today to however far you future pace to see if you may have missed any landmines, if you left any information that should have been addressed. Any comments or input on that? Michael?
Yeah, the way people perceive their memories. I mean, that's had the discussion with Dr. David, had the discussion with everybody. They've got their own perception of reality. And then what's cool when you start playing with the memory game, when you look at yourself, looking at yourself, and you can change the feelings, and there's some cool things.
Yep.
I think if you change things, it is really useful to have a witness, like Holly was saying, to acknowledge your new reality or your new perception or your new cut on it. I think the acknowledgement or the space holding from somebody else makes it very much more effective, believable, and much quicker for you to accept. And if you repeat that story to somebody more than once, well, if you want to change it, if you repeat the changes, it's definitely more believable to you as well.
Exactly. And I think that's also why working with a person one-on-one, rather than people who get a DVD or a cassette and try and do this work where, yeah, it's there, it can work, but it may not be quite as effective because you don't have that witness, like we're talking to say, yeah, wow, you did it, you went in there, I saw it happen. And so you have that validation, that third party, that witness to the change work. Does that answer the question a little bit further?
It definitely offers insights. I have a part that would do a whole lot of arguing right now, and we wouldn't even have her come out.
Is it?
Lenora, it's not about being right, it's about being kind.
Okay. I'll leave with okay.
Holly?
I'm gonna say too, if there's a part of her she's right. If she's saying that, she's right. As I said earlier, she's your, light on your dashboard telling you there's something wrong in there that needs to be addressed. And if these techniques, maybe they work for one person with one kind of resentment, but if resentment's coming up for a completely different reason, then, you need to get the, if somebody comes in and says they're, complaining of a hurt leg, the doctor has probably 200 different diagnoses that might be associated with that. And the cure for one version is not going to be the cure for every single version. And so the first thing I would do is pull her out and say, okay, what is it that you need? Why are you in so much pain? Why does this hurt? And by the way, no matter what you say, I'm not going to shame you. I'm just here to hold space for you and let you tell me, because you know what? That gut instinct, it may not always be right about what we're supposed to do, but it's always right that we're in pain and that something needs to be done, if that makes sense. And sometimes we try to shame it. No, you're not supposed to hurt. Go back down, put your head down. And maybe we've been doing that for a long time, and she just gets sadder and sadder and sadder and angrier and angrier and angrier because you've been hurt and it hasn't been acknowledged, it hasn't been addressed, it hasn't been healed. Instead, it's been shamed. And so, hold space for her, ask her what she needs, and write it down. And if you need somebody, if you don't want to be the driver and the passenger at the same time, you've got a tribe. I'm sure one of us would be definitely willing to work with you, or maybe even multiple.
Yep. Michael.
On Holly's note, 100%. I used to work with a doctor in Flagstaff, Arizona, and he's a true healer. Kind of a wacky guy. His name is Dr. David Milgram, and he's got Turtle Island Healing Center. And first time I went to him, I had a spot in my back. He's a chiropractor, and it felt like someone was digging a pin behind my right shoulder blade. And I tried Rolfing, chiropractic, everything. Nothing would fix it. Acupuncture. So I go give this guy a chance, and he touches me. He says, yeah, you fell down one time. And I looked at him like, okay, I used to race jet skis. I was a cheerleader in college, wrestled all through high school. I've fallen down 10 million times, let alone once. But this guy's a quack. He says, well, Mike, you've got this vertebrae, it's a little twist. I'm just going to pop it. You just go ahead and think about it. And he leaves the room, and I'm going, quack, crazy person. Oh my God. I can't believe I'm here seeing this person. And then after about 10 minutes of vacillating, I remembered running down McConnell Hall, the stairs. I was racing my buddies. There were cement stairs, and I was jumping down each flight. And there was a cement beam, and I hit my head on the cement beam and fell back on the stairs. And I thought I broke my back. And he comes into the room. I said, yes. He says, I saw you laying on these stairs. You fell down one time. I'm like, wow. And so I've taken several people to him, and just amazing. And the way he works, his modality, he sees people kind of underwater. And you know how sound and different energies move differently underwater. So he touches you and it's like, and he gets this total vibe, and really cool guy. So anyway.
That sounds like that woo-woo stuff. That doesn't work, does it? The squirrel, I also had a squirrel deliver a little idea, is it may be tougher if the person may have been in a position of authority where you felt like you couldn't lash out or whatever, and so the resentment will grow because you don't have that outlet, whether they're older than you or a family member or a boss. That's why I brought up earlier that a lot of times a lot of resentment comes up in the workplace because of a position of authority that you feel helpless against. Fran.
we're moving into shadow work here, which isn't something I particularly indulge in, but Holly's point about no judgment of that part of you is enormously important. And giving yourself permission to acknowledge the parts that you do suppress, the parts that you refuse to acknowledge that are you, including the parts that want vengeance. So if you're going to feel those, why not do it like you mean it and have these wonderful vengeance fantasies to the point where they make you laugh? And sometimes that's a nice way to acknowledge that hurt part and get them over feeling that hurt and ignored state. If they can contribute to this over-the-top vengeance imaginary scenario, then it's out of your system and it's not stuck and suppressed. So having indulged in a few illicit vengeance fantasies from time to time, it can be quite fun. And once it makes you laugh, it's gone.
Yeah, we've heard a couple of great stories about that, and even watched a couple of videos of sessions where clients were allowed to strike pillows while in, and a couple of them got like, woo! Man, if I was the practitioner in that room, I'd be like, okay, I'll be like right over here and kind of just watching. But one that David told a number of times was a young lady who had been unfortunately molested by her uncle and held resentment and all this stuff for many years. And so it was suggested that, well, is there anybody that could bring in justice? And while she was in trance and arguing with her uncle, who came in? Grandma. Grandma knew everything that happened all of a sudden. She put the smack down on the uncle, whooped his butt 28 days into Thursday, and she just like, look, she is smacking him up. Oh, go grandma, bam, 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 bam. But when it was over, she had gotten the closure that she wanted. And I think now I understand it even a little bit better. She had a witness and got the vengeance and got the justice all wrapped into one event. Holly.
All these wonderful comments keep making me think of things too. One of the things I've noticed too is, I mean, sometimes if the person's truly evil enough and whatever, people are able to just go to town and beat them. But sometimes you can sense that the person who's going into the regression needs to get that anger out. But the problem they're having is that the person in front of them is a mixture of people. So maybe it's dad, and maybe dad molested them when they were younger. But at the same time, dad came to school and beat the bully up who was beating them on a different day. And it's like, how can I reconcile beating up the man who protected me and who, on these times, but also hurt me on these times? And so what I'll often let people do is divide that person into 3 or 4 different people. And so I'll say, okay, this is the good part of mom or dad or grandma or uncle or even a teacher or whatever. And this is the person who is just hurt and passing on hurt. They can't help it. And this is the part of them that's evil. And then if you want a 4th person, this is the person who just did the best they could, but just didn't know, didn't understand. And I'll let them do a different thing to each of those 4 people. So for example, and sometimes the good person even wants to beat up the bad person directly for you. You don't even have to do it. As soon as that good person, is out, they want to do it. But what will happen often is we'll say, okay, the good person, we're going to let them just sit to the side for a minute. And often what people want to do with the hurt person, you might need to talk to them in a way that they have to listen. You know, there's a force holding them in place and they have to hear everything that is said. And then often the most common thing people want to do is send them to a place of healing. And so I'll have, you know, guardians or angels or whatever speaks to that person's belief system come down and bring that person to a place of healing. And the reason they come in is because it's, hey, they're going to a place of healing, but they're not your problem anymore. And they can't hurt you because they've got these, you know, these guardians, these angels, these, or it could be hospital doctors, orderlies, whatever you want to think of them, taking them to a place that they will do better, but they can't hurt you anymore because they're guarded. And then, you know, the person who maybe doesn't know any better, they get sent off to a school where they can learn more and they're not your problem anymore as well. And that leaves the piece of them that's still evil. And now you don't have to feel guilty going all out and beating the crap out of them because you're only beating the part of them that deserves to beaten up. So that speaks to some people. It doesn't speak to others, but just thought I'd throw that out there that if you're having trouble beating them up, take the part that doesn't deserve to be out and beat up the part that does.
Good answer. Great metaphor. Fran.
I love that, Holly. That's so cool. There's another aspect that we haven't mentioned, or this time around that I've heard anyway, about when somebody has been molested and they have extreme guilt because some part of that molestation, not in all cases, but in some cases, some part of that molestation was actually pleasurable. And the guilt for experiencing pleasure or any form of gratification in that situation is something that they find almost impossible to resolve. So I don't know if other people have got input on that, but, you know, just throwing it out there that that's maybe something that you need to stick in the back of your mind if you're dealing with a molestation memory. Okay, the vast majority is going to be horrible, but there may be that little bit that is needed to be acknowledged or dealt with to clean it up. The other thing is the Raymond Grace style of cleaning it up. I don't know whether many of you have had a chance to have a look at Raymond Grace's methods and website, but he's an energy worker and he works purely with energy, and he changes the energy. And he also works energetically in his imagination, and quite often emasculates those men that are perpetrating in energy form. And that in itself, or doing something really horrible on behalf of the person, can't look up, go back in time, and stop it from happening, maybe emasculate them or stop them, crush them in some way. There's no feelings of karma problems with this. But it's an interesting perspective, and it certainly takes the responsibility for the person who was hurt to actually deal with the problem in the same way that Holly was relieving them of parts of the problem. It's sort of letting a higher authority deal with it, and it's no longer your job to sort it out. It's already sorted.
Holly.
Sorry, I accidentally bumped the hand. I didn't mean to do that. I know we're out of time. So I have thoughts, but I know we're out of time.
Well, unfortunately, that's true. And like I've said before, if people don't believe in time manipulation, we prove it all the time. If you want to make a minute last a long time, do a plank. If you want to see 2 hours fly by, get into a good conversation with a great group of people, and all of a sudden, boom, 2 hours gone just like that. Yeah, so unfortunately, we're going to have to cut this one short. Great information. I'm so glad you guys showed up. And as always, I will always thank you so much for offering up your valuable commodity of time for this platform so that we can share our thoughts or ideas and make our community better. I look forward to seeing you guys again, all your beautiful smiling faces back here in 7 days. I adore all of you. I don't even have the vocabulary to tell you how I feel about you guys. 161 times now we've shown up. And it still blows my mind. I know you guys have heard this a lot of times, but the fact that I put this off for 3 years because I didn't think we'd be able to come up with enough stuff for 3 sessions. This proved it. We can keep going as long as you guys keep showing up. So take care, be kind to yourselves, live life as full as possible, and look forward to, again, seeing you soon. Love you all. Oh, and before I forget, YouTube, love you, Mom.
Good night.
Then
Oh,
everybody,
hugs.
good seeing y'all.